We continue our focus on South Africa's lockdown restrictions. Organisers of events could be held legally liable if the attendees or anyone in close vicinity to the event contract the virus and die or develop serious health complications. Large gatherings remain under much scrutiny as fears of a third wave of infections remain a reality. Let's discuss the impact of non-compliance by event organisers, especially ahead of the Easter weekend. I'm joined now by associate and litigation attorney at Adams & Adams, Mthokozisi Maphumulo, to help us understand the legal risk associated with gathering in large groups. Mthokozisi, a very good evening. Thank you for speaking to us. You've recently done a paper. Take us through the content of that paper, if you will.
A very good evening, and a very good evening to your viewers as well. So I've written a paper which basically looks at the legalities surrounding the issue of large crowds, large gatherings in light of the ongoing pandemic. So that paper looks at what are the inherent legal perils, looks at possible, the questions basically are whether there may be criminal charges that may be laid against the organizers and the hosts of these large gatherings, and in what circumstances can that be the case. Then we also look at whether in case where a person who attended subsequently gets the virus, or the legal indicators show that the probable area or place where it was contracted, it was a certain gathering. We look then at whether they may have any legal recourse against the organizers and the host of those events. Then we look at some practical examples and also the mitigating risks for the event organizers to say if they implement these particular measures, there may be some room to argue that they are not legally responsible for whatever claims in civil law or criminal charges that may be laid against them.
Well, I suppose one of the things that people talk about when pioneering such activities is precedence. Do we have precedence? Is there likely of any precedence across the globe?
Not in the context of this particular pandemic. However, there are tried legal principles that may be adopted and implemented, or rather be used in this particular in this particular context of the pandemic. So there is an indirect, so to speak, there is an indirect precedent in the sense that there are settled, well-established legal principles applicable.
So let me give you maybe two scenarios. In the first, I'm called to an event at work, and I end up catching COVID. I'm in a hospital for a long time. Can I come back and sue my employer? And I suppose the second scenario is religious activities, particularly around now where there is Easter coming up. If you go to church, you go to a church event or any other religious event during this time, you catch COVID or a relative or family catch COVID, what are the chances there of suing the event organizers? Okay.
With regards to the first scenario between the employer and the employee, the law states precisely that the employee can never sue the employer. At best, what can be done is for the employee to lodge a claim against the WCC, being the Workers' Compensation Commissioner. So there can never be a claim against the employer by an employee. Then moving to the second scenario relating to the religious leaders. Okay, so as leaders, as the organizers, they have a duty of care towards the attendees and the members of their church. So as a member of the church, you decide to go to a particular, at the Easter event of the church. you go there with that in mind, that the organizers have obliged with the laws and the regulations to start with. Secondly, you also go there knowing, or rather reasonably believing, that there has been certain protocols that have been put in place, considering that the leaders have this legal duty of care towards them. Then you go there, then if those are not in place and you end up contracting the virus, there may be a room to argue in law that the church leaders are responsible for you contracting the virus. Having said that, I must point out that there is a room by the church leaders to say, but you as the attendee or the church member, you should shoulder some blame as well. And there is a legal principle that we refer to as an apportionment that may then be applied. That is to say, for an example, the church leaders will be 60% responsible, and the employee, the church member will be 40% responsible. And that the practical effect of that will be reflected in the amount of the compensation, if any, that the church member is going to be entitled to.
Mthokozisi, maybe to give you my last question and potentially throw the cat amongst the pigeons. In a few months or in a few weeks, the elections are certainly likely to happen. And in that instance where you go to vote and you catch the virus, any recourse if you catch the virus in that instance?
I will answer in a way that's going to be a bit ambiguous, to say yes and no. The facts and the circumstances are going to determine. I will just make a short practical example. If I am in the queue in the voting to the voting polls, and there are no properly floor markings. You know, there are so many of us, and we do not allow that required 1.5 meters apart social distancing, and there is no sanitizing at that particular station. Then there may be some room to maneuver. However, there are certain obstacles and the stumbling blocks that you may find yourself in. But in theory, at very least, there is a legal recourse.
Well, lovely to speak to you. That was Associate and Litigation Attorney at Adams & Adams, Mthokozisi Maphumulo. This is News at Prime. Do stay with us. We'll be right back after this.